morning. It's Bonnie again with stories from the Hebrew and Christian Bibles, timeless themes. Today our story is about Jesus and his miracles, and the theme is miracles. First thing I want you to remember is that all these stories about Jesus were never written down until about 40 years after his death, and they were all collected by men who didn't even know him personally when he was alive. So remember how that telephone game goes, and we talked about the Hebrew stories and how they got changed as they got told over and over and over, and finally written down. So remember that these are stories. Miracle, let's review that. We had that when we did Daniel in the lion's den, and when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were in the fiery furnace. Miracle is an amazing, helpful event that goes against the laws of nature, like they went in the fiery furnace and didn't get burned, and they went in the lion's den and the lions didn't attack him. So we're going to find some miracles today that happened, that were told about Jesus. And another definition is this money we talked about, I believe it was last week, Caesar's, with Caesar's picture on it, and that was called denarii. And it was about a whole day's wage. That's what a man could earn by working a whole day. So that kind of tells you its value, a whole day's worth of work. Okay, let's go to the final board for our first story, our first miracle. Actually, there are 4 today, 4 miracles that are rolled into this one lesson here. So this is the miracle of Jesus turning water into wine. Now, it seems that Jesus and his disciples had been invited to a wedding in Cana. And they went, and he found that his mother was at the wedding too. So it must have been somebody that they knew well. But they served a lot of wine in those days that they made themselves, and they ran out with all the guests there. And Mary was very concerned. Oh, what are we going to do? And she went to Jesus and she said, Jesus, can you do anything about this? We're out of wine and we have nothing to serve the guest. And Jesus told some of the people, and looks like some children here and maybe some other people, to go and get water and to fill all these were wine casks that were full of wine that had been used up, and to pour the water in it. And they did. And then I guess they let it sit for a little while. I don't know, the story doesn't tell us that, but it does tell us that when they served it to the guests, well, they said it was better than the first place, the wine that was there in the first place. So that was Jesus' first miracle of turning the water into wine at the wedding. Okay, miracle number 1. Change of scene here. And we'll go to miracle number 2. Jesus began to get quite a following after that, and people came to see him from far and wide. And let's put a lot of people up here this time, because this was the day when Jesus was telling the stories. And he sat there and he had his disciples, but he also had a lot of other people that had come out. I mean, a lot. Children, women, men, everybody was there to hear Jesus tell his stories. And he had been there for a long time telling the stories, and his disciples said, you know, all these people are here. I've lost my, here it is. And they've been here a long time, and they've got to be hungry. So we should feed them. And Jesus said, well, okay, let's do that. And with that, they said, well, we're out here, we don't have, this is going to take a lot of money to feed all these people. There must be 5,000 people here. And Jesus said, well, just go see what you could find. So they searched the crowd, and they looked, and they finally found this one little boy that had a lunch basket. And they took him to Jesus, and they said, this is all we found. And he said, what do you have in your lunch, child? And the little boy said, I have 5 loaves of bread. Now, don't think like our loaves of bread. They're just little, like rolls almost. And 2 fish. That was my lunch that my mom packed for me today, so I could come and listen to you. And he said, well, may I have it and share it? And he said, yes. So Jesus took it, and he broke the fish into little pieces, and he broke all the rolls into pieces, and he said, okay, now go pass these out among the people. So they started passing these out among the people. I guess they had some baskets there. Well, the people ate. Now all those people that were there, and 5 little rolls and 2 little fish. But according to the story, there was so much left over that when they took up the baskets, there were 12 baskets of food left over. Now you say, how can that happen? Well, that's a miracle. Some people have tried to say, maybe some people did have food and they decided to share it, kind of like a potluck, and that there were a lot, and then when everybody ate their fill, there was all that left over because they decided to share. That's one theory, but that's also considered the second miracle. Now let's go back to the computer again, because I don't have flannel characters for the third one, and I had to look up some computer images. So this is number 3. In those days, they didn't know much about mental illness. We know a lot more now about the mind and what can happen to it, but they didn't know. So they thought if somebody was acting really strangely, that an unclean spirit had gone into them. That's what they called it, an unclean spirit. So there was this man who was very, very wild. He lived in the tomb, among the tombs where they buried people. And he hurt himself. He would hit himself, and they were afraid he would hurt not only himself but other people. So they tried to chain him to keep him from hurting himself and other people, and he was so strong that he broke the chains and went on hurting himself. So they asked Jesus to come and see this man, and he did. And he, according to the story, said, they called him the spirit, a demon sometime, and he said, come out of this man. And according to the story, there were pigs nearby, people that had raised pigs, or maybe they were wild pigs, boars, and that demon went into the pigs instead of him, and they raced off into the ocean and drowned. And when people came by later to see the man, he was of sound mind, and he could talk to them, and he wasn't wild anymore. So that's miracle number 3. Now, miracle number 4. Gotta have a whole change of scenery here. Because now this day was over, where they had been all day with these people, and the disciples were pretty tired, and Jesus was having a hard time getting the people to go home, but he finally convinced them to go home, and he told the disciples to go across the river and rest. And they said, well, come on. And he said, no, I'm going to go up into the mountain and pray. So he did. He went up to the mountain and he was praying. And the disciples got on their boat. Well, a big storm came up. And there was lightning and thunder and big waves. And the boat was tossing. It sounds like another story we had back of the Hebrews, doesn't it? And suddenly, they saw a figure coming out on the water. And they didn't know. They said it was a ghost. They started to scream. And the figure said, do not be afraid. It is I, Jesus. Be not afraid. And Peter, one of his disciples, was on the boat, and he said, Lord, I want to come to you. And Jesus said, come, Peter. So Peter got out of the boat and started walking and looking at Jesus, and suddenly he realized what he was doing, and down he went into the water. And Jesus went over, rescued him, and they both got in the boat and went on their way, and Jesus calmed it all down, and off they went to rest. And that was miracle number 4, Jesus walking on the water. So I had somebody tell me one time he knew where the stones were, but it's also considered one of his miracles. Okay, let's go back to the computer, and we have our Amen song with a new verse, but we've got so many verses now, I think let's just skip the first page and go to the second page. Let's do the chorus first so we remember how it sounds. Amen, 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 amen. Now, when you're at home, if you want to sing all those, you can, but we're going to go on to the next one. And let's start with verse 5. See him by the Jordan, wading in the water. John the Baptist bless him, amen, amen. See him in the desert, 40 days and nights there, tempted by the devil, amen, amen. See him with his mother at the feast of Cana, making wine from water, amen, 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 amen. Now let's just think just a minute about what a miracle could mean in our life. What to you would be a good miracle that could happen, that seems like it might not happen in our time? I'm thinking about events that have happened this week, and I'm thinking that if we had peace on earth, that would be a miracle. I'm thinking that if we had love for everybody, no matter what color their skin is, what religion they are, that would be like a miracle. It seems like that we are so divided. I want you to think about those things this week and think what can you do to make that happen? Remember that word I taught you, ashe, let's make it happen? And I know you're just a child yet, but you can be kind to other people. You can be kind in your world, in your school when we have school again. So what can you do to make miracles happen? Next week, we're going to talk about Jesus' healing powers, more seeming miracles. See you next week.